you had an opportunity to address the audience was here this morning at this very significant event. And thank you all for being here and having this opportunity to discuss what we believe is a very positive story, which is Britain's offer to the business community across Asia and specifically here in Singapore. And I should start by saying that I am the Foreign Office Minister who takes the lead on all of Pacific Asia, so China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and Latin America as well. And I also have a responsibility within our Foreign Affairs Department, what we call the emerging powers, the countries, particularly in Asia, as well as a few others like Brazil, but particularly in Asia, which are growing very rapidly and are changing the whole face of the world economy. And the task for Britain is to understand that phenomenon, to be part of that phenomenon, to adjust to that phenomenon, and make sure that we are equipped to succeed in a world which no longer orientates pretty much around North America, Europe and Japan, but is a much more diverse global economy, as I say, with particular emphasis on growth happening across Asia. And obviously the hub for that process in this part of the world is Singapore. It is far and away the most established and developed economy in Asia, and it has all kinds of historic ties and links with Britain. So we want to be part of that success story. We want to be part of that success story working in harness with Singapore, and that is why, as I say, I'm particularly pleased to be here today, because it is relevant, I hope not just to you, but to the whole agenda of the British government. I should start by saying that when you read the newspapers or you watch your TV screens, a lot of the news coming out of Britain is not uniformly positive. We're looking forward to the Olympic Games, which I think will be a fantastic event, and although that is a digital representation, it does look like that in real life as well. And it's a sign, I hope, of British engineering expertise and design specialist skills and management competence that the Olympic Park will be finished a full year ahead of schedule. So it won't be one of those games where they're still painting the stadium when the athletes are turning up. We will have a fantastic games, and it will be a great showcase for global sport. But I believe it's a great showcase as well for what Britain can offer the world economy, which, as I say, is project management expertise, marketing expertise, design expertise, architectural expertise. There's a whole environmental expertise. There is a package of positive measures which are embodied in what we are doing in the Olympics. But there isn't, as I say, an overall story coming out of Britain which is completely positive. We suffered, as did all of the developed economies in the world to a greater or lesser extent, from the shock to the global banking system. We had 6 quarters of negative growth. We had the worst peacetime year for the British economy since 1921, in 2009, and we are still recovering from that process. And part of the recovery, and what makes it particularly difficult for us, is that we are running a completely unsustainable budget deficit. We are borrowing in Britain an extra £425 million every single day, and that is not affordable. We're borrowing more than 10% of our GDP, and that clearly isn't a position that we can sustain. So the central priority of the coalition government that was formed in May of last year in London is to get to grips with and eliminate the structural deficit within the lifetime of this Parliament, so by 2015. And that is what we are committed to doing, and that is what we will do. And I think a lot of the confidence that exists around Britain for investors is based on a fairly safe assumption that people have, and markets are completely unsentimental about politicians, a safe assumption that the government is committed to the course of action that it has stated in Parliament, and that we will deliver that balanced budget by the end of this Parliament. And we are taking decisive steps to do that. It isn't always popular. Giving an ill patient strong medicine isn't necessarily what the patient wants to take. But the patient will be grateful when he or she feels better at the end of the process. And we firmly believe it's necessary, not least because we're in a much more global and competitive environment, and Britain cannot afford to have an unsustainable budget deficit and live beyond its means in a world where there's lots of alternative locations for people to invest their money and sell their goods and services. So there is a backdrop which is difficult for us, and I don't pretend otherwise, and we are having to make some tough decisions in terms of public spending and in terms of taxation at the same time. But I think the fundamentals are very good for Britain, and the fundamentals are all the better precisely because we are taking those difficult decisions to make sure that we get it right. So Britain, as was said by Mr. Ho in his introduction, is, I think, the fourth best place in the world to do business, the best in Europe, not sadly the best in the world. That title is held by Singapore. But we at least have the potential to get better, as we're only the fourth. But where Singapore is going to have to just stay at the top. I think it's already been there for 5 years. But we are the fourth best country in the world, which is a pretty good place to be. The best, as I say, in Europe to do business, even against the backdrop of a very difficult fiscal environment. We are nevertheless cutting corporation tax. The Chancellor's original intention was to cut corporation tax by 1 pence in the pound every year this Parliament, but in his budget 2 weeks ago he cut 2 pence off the rate for next year. So we are cutting corporation tax even more aggressively than was originally stated, and it will be, by the end of this Parliament, the lowest level of any G7 major economy in the world. Britain is still the 6th largest economy in the world, and it is worth saying as well, we're also the 6th largest manufacturing economy in the world, because there is a perception that exists, and sometimes I think it is fueled by the British themselves, that Britain is good at exactly the sort of things I was talking about in the earlier part of my speech, that we're good at professional services, that we're good at project management. We are. Those are areas of real competitive advantage for Britain. But we still have a substantial manufacturing base, and a lot of that is in high-end, specialist, skilled manufacturing. So Britain has a rounded economy, it has a balanced economy, and it has the 6th biggest economy in the world. It's an economy that will be familiar to investors from Singapore, who are in most cases more familiar with English than any other European language, but are also familiar with our legal systems, our cultural outlook, and other features which form the backdrop for a successful business environment. And on the sort of wider sort of cultural point, I know a lot of Singaporeans have studied at university in Britain, or are familiar with some of the teaching methods that we deploy in Britain, and our Secretary of State for Education was visiting Singapore recently to try and have a mutual process of learning from each other in this regard, and was very impressed by what he saw here. But there are opportunities for people in Singapore to be part of that wider cultural story. I've been impressed by everybody I've met here knowing more about the English Premier League than people seem to at home, although far too many people here support Manchester United, which we're going to have to do something about. But nevertheless, it is part of a wider sort of cultural and social familiarity, which I think is an important feature of any business relationship. And finally, I suppose, it's worth remembering that that Britain, as a major country in the European Union, provides a stepping stone, a gateway to the largest single market in the world, the largest economy in the world, European Union, bigger than that even of the United States. It's a single market, 500 or so million people, roughly the same size in population terms as Southeast Asia, but obviously considerably bigger in economic terms. And Britain is an ideal location because of our competitive advantages in terms of tax, in terms of English language, in terms of culture, in terms of the place of London as a world city, but also other major cities across Britain. We are ideally placed for businesses in this part of the world who want to leapfrog into Europe, that we have a market ourselves of over 60 million people, but we have the access to a market of more like 500 million people, and most of those are high-end consumers who are able to participate fully in the economy and are buying goods and services on a daily basis. So for all of those reasons, I hope that people in Singapore will continue to look to Britain as the ideal place to do business. We want to be partners with Singapore, we want to be partners with Asia, we want to be part of the success story in this part of the world, but we want people in this part of the world to also understand that they could be successful by investing in our country as well. Thank you very much.